In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. The Abracast. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey, welcome to the Abracast. I'm John Towers. This is Book Club Wednesday. We're still chipping our way through Nietzsche's Thus Spake Zarathustra. I was curious because this is like part 12, and then we did also 3 parts kind of like philosophizing about the text. I need to do at least 2 more of those pretty soon, or I'll lose sight of the thing. But so it's like 12, like 15 or 16 hours worth of Zarathustra talk so far. So just on a whim, I Google searched how long does it take a person to read the Spake Zarathustra, and the answer was like 7.5 hours. And I'm like, I'm looking at how much more I got to go, and I'm like, motherfucker. Anyhow. So we're trying out some new stuff here. We got the Flick app for people that are obsessed with podcasts. Some people have already heard of this thing. Anyhow, I got blasted an email where they were like, "Hey, do you want to help us beta this?" And it seems like it's already been betaed. I don't know, but it's like a messenger built around the podcast. And so you can interact with other listeners, hosts, other podcasts. It seems pretty cool. I'm still kind of like bumping around in it. I'm like, hey, yo, Generation X here. This is pretty advanced stuff. But I'll put the link in the show notes if any of you guys are already on there or you're interested in it. And then the code to get into my section, I guess, is the Abracast. All one word, all lowercase. So I put that information in the show notes. If this is something that takes off, it's really cool. I could see the potential in it. It's really neat. I should mention that this is totally different than the Slack work group. To get to the Slack work group, you have to sign into the Fulgor Correspondentia degree, which is basically the mailing list. And if you sign in, you get access to the work group. Also, this month you get the infographic, the 9/11 in context infographic, which is pretty cool. I spent a lot of time working on it. It's pretty neat. And then also the Melchizedek theory infographic, along with some scanned in artwork from about the Archangel Gabriel. So that's the September Fulgor Correspondentia stuff, and also the Flick app business. So if you're interested, check it out. But we're going to jump right into this. We're going to find out what that wacky Zarathustra is up to today. But first, if you're playing at home, this is when I would like you to summon your vessel of the art. If you're a member of the degree of the vessel of the art, a knight in the degree of the vessel of the art, summon your vessel of the art. Mix up your favorite weapon of mass distraction in there. Mine tonight, as usual, is Jin Jihad. And raise your fists and your vessels to the sky. And join me in thanking my Patreons and my subscribe stars, the people that support the show, make it possible. So here is to you, my friends. Wednesday book club, bro. Let's get it on. There is an island in the sea, not far from Zarathustra's blessed isles, on which a fire-spewing mountain smokes continuously. And the people say of it, and especially the old women among the people, say that it has been placed like a huge rock before the gate to the underworld, and that the narrow path that leads to this gate to this underworld goes through the fire-spewing mountain. Now, it was during the time when Zarathustra was staying on the Blessed Isles that a ship anchored at the island with the smoking mountain, and the crew went ashore to shoot rabbits. Around noon, however, when the captain and his men were together again, they suddenly saw a man approached through the air, and a voice said distinctly, "It is time, it is high time." And when the shape had come closest to them, and it flew by swiftly as a shadow in the direction of the fire-spewing mountain, they realized with a great sense of shock that it was Zarathustra. For all of them who seen him before, except the captain, and they loved him as the people loved him. And a love that is mixed with an equal amount of awe. "Look there," said one of the old helmsmen. "There is Zarathustra descending to hell." At the time these seamen landed on the Isle of Fire, there was a rumor abroad that Zarathustra had disappeared. And when his friends were asked, they said that he had embarked by night without saying where he intended to go. Thus, uneasiness arose, and after 3 days, the story of the seaman was added to this uneasiness. And now all the people said that the devil had taken Zarathustra. His disciples laughed at such talk, to be sure. And one of them even said, "Sooner would I believe that Zarathustra has taken the devil." But deep in their souls, they were all of them full of worry and longing. Thus, their joy was great when on the 5th day Zarathustra appeared among them. And this is the story of Zarathustra's conversation with the fire hound. The earth, he said, has a skin, and this skin has disease. One of these diseases, for example, is called man, and another one of these diseases is called fire hound. And him men have told each other and believed many lies. To get to the bottom of this mystery, I went over the sea, and I have seen truth naked, verily barefoot upon the throat. Now I am informed concerning the fire hound, and also concerning all scum and overthrow devils, of whom not only old men and women are afraid. "Out with you, fire hound, out from your depths," I cried, "and confess how deep this depth is. Whence come what you are snorting up here? You drink copiously from the sea. Your salty eloquence shows that, indeed. For a hound of the depth, you take your nourishment too much from the surface. At most, I take you for the earth's ventriloquist. And whenever I have heard overthrow and scum devils talking, I found them like you, salty, mendacious and superficial. You know how to bellow and to darken with ashes. You are the best braggarts and great experts in the art of making mud seethe. Wherever you are, mud must always be nearby. and as much that is spongy and cavernous comprised and wants freedom. Freedom is what all of you like best to bellow. But I have outgrown the belief in great events. Wherever there is much bellowing and smoke, believe me, friend, hellish noise, the greatest events, they are not our loudest, but our stillest hours, not around the inventors of a new noise, but around the inventors of new values. Does the world revolve? It revolves inaudibly. Admit it. Wherever your noise and your smoke were gone, very little had happened. And what does it matter if a town becomes a mummy and a statue lies in the mud? And this word I shall add for those who overthrow statues. Nothing is more foolish than casting salt into the sea and statues into the mud. Sometimes this book seems like it's just reaching across the years to talk to us. Back to it. The statues lay in the mud of your contempt, but precisely this is its law. And out of contempt, life and living beauty come back to it. It rises again with more godlike features, seductive through suffering, and verily it will yet thank you for having overthrown it. Oh, you overthrowers! This counsel, however, I give to kings and churches and everything that is weak with age and weak in virtue. Let yourselves be overthrown so that you may return to life and virtue return to you. Thus I spoke before the fire hounds. Then he interrupted me crossly and asked, "Church, what is that?" "Church," I answered. "That is a kind of state, the most mendacious kind. But be still, you hypocritical hound. You know of your own kind best, like you. The state is hypocritical. The state is a hypocritical hound. And it likes to talk with smoke and bellowing and make himself believe, like you, that he is talking out of the belly of reality, for he wants to be all means by most important beast on earth, the state, and they believe him too." When I had said that, the firehound carried on as if crazy with envy. "What?" he cried. "The most important beast on earth, and they believed him too?" So much steam and so many revolting voices came out of his throat that I thought he would suffocate with anger and envy. At last, he grew calmer, and his gasping eased, and as soon as he was calm, I said, laughing, "You are angry, firehound, so I am right about you. And that I may continue to be right, let me tell you about another firehound. He really speaks out of the heart of the earth, and he exhales gold and golden rain. This, his heart wants it. What are ashes and smoke and hot slime to him? Laughter flutters out of him like colorful clouds. Nor is he well disposed towards your gurgling and spewing and intestinal rumblings. This gold, however, and this laughter he takes from the heart of the earth, for knows this: the heart of the earth is of gold. And when the firehound heard this, he could no longer bear listening to me. Shamed, he drew his tail in a cowed manner and said bow wow and crawled down into his cave. Thus related Zarathustra, but his disciples barely listened. So great were their desire to tell him of the seamen, the rabbits, and the flying man. What shall I think of that? Said Zarathustra. Am I a ghost then? But I must have been my shadow, I suppose. You have heard of the wanderer of this shadow. This, however, is clear. I must watch it more closely, else it may yet spoil my reputation. And once more, Zarathustra shook his head and wondered, what shall I think of that? He had said once more, when did the ghost cry, it is time, high time for what? Thus spoke Zarathustra. The Soothsayer. And I saw a great sadness descend upon mankind. The best grew weary of their words. A doctrine appeared accompanied by a faith. All is empty and all is the same. All has been. And from all the hills it echoed. All empty, all the same, all has been. Indeed, we have harvested, but why did all our fruit turn rotten and brown? What fell down from the evil moon last night? In vain was all our works, our wine has turned to poison, an evil eye has seared our fields and hearts. We have become dry, and if fire should descend upon us, we should turn to ashes indeed. We have wearied the fire itself. All our wells have dried up. Even the sea has withdrawn. All the soil would crack, but the depths refuse to devour. Alas, where is there still a sea in which one might drown? Thus we are wailing across shallow swamps. Verily, we have become too weary even to die. We are still waking and living on in tombs. Thus Zarathustra heard the Soothsayer speak. And the prophecy touched his heart and changed him. He walked about sad and weary and became like those of whom the Soothsayer has spoken. Verily, he said to his disciples, little is lacking, and the long twilight will come. Alas, how shall I save my light through it? It must not suffocate in the sadness, for it shall be a light in the distant worlds, and even more distant nights. Thus grieved in his heart, Zarathustra walked about, and for 3 days he took neither food nor drink, had no rest, and lost his speech. At last he fell into a deep sleep, but his disciples sat around him in a long night watches and waited with great concern for him to wake and speak again and recover from his melancholy. And this is the speech of Zarathustra when he woke. But his voice came to his disciples as if from a great distance. Listen to the dream which I dreamt, my friends, and help me guess its meaning. This dream is still a riddle to me. Its meaning is concealed, and it is in prison and does not yet soar above it with unfettered wings. I had turned my back on all life. Thus I dreamed I had become a night watchman and a guardian of the tombs upon the lonely mountain castle of death. Up there I guarded his coffins, the musty vaults where, full of such marks of triumph, life had been overcome, looked at me out of glass coffins. I breathe the odor of dusty eternities, sultry and dusty lay my soul. And who could have aired his soul there? The brightness of midnight has always about me, loneliness crouched next to it. And as a third death rattle silenced the worst of my friends, I had keys, the rustiest of all keys. And I knew how to use them to open most of the creaking of all gates, likely a wickedly angry croaking. The sound ran through long corridors when the gate's wings moved. Fiendishly cried a bird, ferocious at being awakened. Yet, still more terrible, the heart constricting was the moment when silence returned and it grew quiet about me. And I sat alone in this treacherous silence. Undead, undead, Zarathustra's undead. Thus time passed and crawled, if time still even existed. How should I know? But eventually that happened which awakened me. Thrice strokes struck at the gate like thunder. The vaults echoed and I howled thrice. And then I went to the gate. Alpa, I cried. Who is carrying his ashes up the mountain? Alpa, Alpa. Who is carrying his ashes up this mountain? And I pressed the key and tried to lift the gate and exerted myself, but still it did not give an inch. Then a roaring wind tore its wings apart, and whistling and shrilling and piercing, it cast up a black coffin before me. And amid the roaring and the whistling and the shrilling, the coffin burst and spewed out 1,000-fold laughter. And from 1,000 grimaces of children, angels, owls, fools, and butterflies as big as children, it laughed and it mocked and it roared at me. Then I was terribly frightened, and it threw me to the ground, and I cried in horror as I have never cried. My own cry awakened me, and I came to my senses. Thus Zarathustra told his dream and then became silent, for as yet he did not know of the interpretation of the dream. But the disciple whom he loved most rose quickly and took Zarathustra's hand and says, "Your life itself interprets this dream for us, O Zarathustra. Are you not yourself in the wind, with the shrill whistling air that tears open the gates of the castle of death? Are you not yourself the coffin full of colorful sarcasms and the angelic grimaces of life? Verily, like 1,000-fold children's laughter, Zarathustra enters all death chambers, laughing at all night watchmen and guardians of tombs, and at whoever else is rattling the gloomy keys. You will frighten and prostrate them with your laughter, and your power over them will make them faint and wake up. And when the long twilight and the weariness of death come, you will not set in our sky. You advocate of life, new stars you have let us see, and new wonders of the night. Verily, laughter itself you have spread over us like a colorful tent. Henceforth children's laughter will well forth from all coffins. Henceforth a strong wind will come triumphantly to all weariness of death. Of this you yourself are surety and soothsayer. Verily this is what you dreamt of, your enemies. That is your hardest dream. But you woke from them and came to your senses, and they shall awaken from themselves and come to you. Thus spoke the disciple, and all others crowded around Zarathustra and took hold of his hands and wanted to persuade him to leave his bed and his sadness and return to them. But Zarathustra sat erect on his resting place with a strange look in his eye, like one coming home from a long sojourn in a strange land. He looked at his disciples and examined their faces, and as yet he did not recognize them. But when they lifted him up and put him on his feet, behold, his eyes suddenly changed and comprehended all that had happened, stroked his beard, and said in a strong voice, "Now then, there is a time for this too. But see to it, my disciples, that we shall have a good meal and soon. Thus I plan to atone for my bad dreams. The Soothsayer, however, shall eat and drink by my side, and verily I shall show him a sea in which he can drown." Thus spoke Zarathustra, but then he looked a long time into the face of the disciple who had played the dream interpreter, and he shook his head. "Undead, undead. Zarathustra's undead, undead."
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content and access to the private Abracast workgroup by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
I like that. I like the porno saxophone behind Hilla there. That's very nice.
On this month's exclusive Order of the Fellowcraft episode.
Towards Mount Rainier, he saw 9 gleaming discs outlined against the snow, each one about the size of a C-54. Is it a function of false reporting? Is it a function of media incompetence or straight up misinformation? From my point of view, every, quote, flying saucer, unquote, story from this point on is at least a suspect for some sort of corruption. It has been over 2 years since the puzzling death of Captain Mantell. Mantell died mysteriously in the skies south of Fort Knox, but before his radio went silent, he sent a strange message to Goodman Air Force Base.
Support the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
I like that one. It reminds me of the transporter sound effect from the Star Trek, the original Star Trek. All right, back to the book. On redemption. When Zarathustra crossed over the great bridge one day, the cripples and beggars surrounded him, and the hunchback spoke to him thus. "Behold, Zarathustra, the people to learn from you and come to believe in your doctrine. But before they will believe you entirely, one thing is still needed. You must first persuade us cripples." Now, here you have a fine skeleton and verily an opportunity with more than one handle. You can heal the blind and make the lame walk. And from him who has too much behind him, you could perhaps take a little away. That, I think, would be right in the way to make a cripple believe in Zarathustra. Whoa, here we go. I think shit's about to get real for this hunchback motherfucker. But Zarathustra replied thus to the man who had spoken. When one takes away the hump from the hunchback, one takes away his spirit. Thus teach the people. And when one restores his eyes to the blind, he may see many wicked things on earth, but he will curse whoever healed him. But whoever make him lame does him the greatest harm. Make the lame walk does him the greatest harm. For when he can walk, his vices run away with him. Thus teach the people about cripples. And why should Zarathustra not learn from the people when the people learn from Zarathustra? But this is what matters least to me, since I have been among men, to see that this one lacks an eye, and that one an ear, and the third a leg, where there are others who have lost their tongues, or their noses, or their heads. I have seen what is worse, and many things so vile that I do not want to speak of everything. And concerning some things, I do not even like to be silent. For there are human beings who lack everything except for one thing which they have too much. Human beings who are nothing but a big eye, or a big mouth, or a big belly, or anything at all that is big. Inverse cripples, I call them. And when I came out of my solitude and crossed over this bridge for the first time, I did not trust my eyes, and I looked again and said, at last, an ear as big as a man. And I looked still more closely indeed. Underneath the ear something was moving, something pitifully small and wretched and slender. And no doubt of it, the tremendous ear was attached to a small, thin stalk, and this stalk was a human being. If one used a magnifying glass, one could even recognize the tiny, envious face that a blotted little soul was dangling from the stalk. The people, however, told me that this great ear was not only a human being, but a great one, some kind of genius. But I never believed the people when they spoke of great men, and I maintained my belief that it was an inverse cripple who had too little of everything and too much of one thing. When Zarathustra had spoken thus to the hunchback and to those whose mouthpiece and advocate the hunchback was, he turned to his disciples in profound dismay and said, "Verily, my friends, I walk amongst men as amongst the fragments of limbs of men, and this is what is terrible for my eyes. I find a man in ruins and scattered over a battlefield or a butcher field. And when my eyes flee from the now to the past, they already find the same fragments and limbs and dreadful accidents, but no human beings." And now the past on earth, alas, my friends, that is what I find most unendurable. And I should not know how to live if I were not also a seer of that which must come, a seer, a willer, a creator, a future himself, and a bridge to the future. And alas, also, as it were, a cripple at this bridge. All this is Zarathustra. And you have often asked yourselves, who is Zarathustra to us? And shall call him. And like myself, you reply to yourselves with questions. Is he a promiser? Is he a fulfiller, a conqueror, or an inheritor? An autumn, a plowshare, a physician, or one who has recovered? Is he a poet or truthful, a liberator, a tamer? Is he good or is he evil? I walk among men as among fragments of the future, and the future which I envisage And this is all my creating and striving, and I create and carry together into one that is fragment and riddle and dreadful accident. And how could I bear to be a man if I were not also a creator or guesser of riddles and redeemer of accidents? To redeem those who lived in the past and to recreate it all it was into thus I willed it, and alone should I call redemption. Well, that is the name of the liberator and the joy bringer. Thus I taught you, my friends, but now learn this too. The will set itself is still a prisoner. Willing liberates. But what is it that puts even the liberator himself in fetters? It was that the name of the will's gnashing of teeth, the most secret melancholy, powerless against what has been done. He is an angry spectator of all that is past, and cannot will backwards. In that he cannot break time and time's covetousness. That is the will's loneliest melancholy. Willing liberates. What means does the will devise for himself to get rid of melancholy and to mock his dungeons? Alas, every prisoner becomes a fool, and the imprisoned will redeems himself foolishly. That time does not run backwards, that his wrath, that which was, is the name of the stone he cannot move, and so. All right, said the hunchback. And one may as well tell pupils tales out of school, but why does Zarathustra speak otherwise of his pupils than to himself? Not the height, but the precipice is terrible. The precipice is where the glance plunges down and the hand reaches up. There the heart becomes giddy, confronted with its double will. Alas, friends, you can see what my heart's double will. This is my precipice and my danger, that my glance plunges into the height, and then my hand would grasp and hold on to the depth. My will clings to man. With fetters, I bind myself to man because I am swept up towards the overman. For this way my other will wants to go. And therefore I live blind among men as if I did not know them, that my hand might not wholly lose its faith in what is firm. I do not know, you men, this darkness and consolation are often spread round me. I sit at the gateway exposed to every rogue, and I ask, who wants to deceive me? And that is my first instance of my human prudence, that I let myself be deceived in order not to be on guard against deceivers. Alas, if I were on guard against men, how could man then be the anchor for my ball? I should be swept up and away too easily. This providence lies over my destiny, that I must be without caution. And whoever does not want to die of thirst among men must learn to drink out of all cups. And those who would stay clean among men must know how to wash even with dirty water, and thus I often comforted myself. Well, then, old heart, one misfortune failed. You enjoy this in your good fortune. This, however, is the second instance of my human prudence, and I spare the vain more than the proud. Is not hurt vanity the mother of all tragedies, but where pride is hurt, there's something better than pride is likely to grow. That life may be good to look at, its play must be well acted, but for that good actors are needed. For the vain are good actors, they act and they want people to enjoy looking at them, and all their spirits is behind this will. They enact themselves and invert themselves near them. I love to look at life that curses my melancholy. Therefore, I spare the vain, for they are physicians of my melancholy, and I keep me attached to my life as to a play. And then I could fathom the full depth of the modesty of the vain man. I am well disposed of him, and I pity his modesty. It is from this that he wants to acquire his faith in himself. He nourishes himself on your glances and eats your praise out of your hands, and he even believes your lies if you lie well about him, for at the bottom of his heart sighs, "What am I?" And if the true virtue is the one of unaware of itself, well, the vain man is unaware of his modesty. This, however, is the third instance of my human prudence, that I do not permit the sight of the evil to be spoiled for me by your timidity. I am delighted to see the wonders hatched by a hot sun, tigers and palms and rattlesnakes among men. To a hot sun hatches a beautiful breed. And there are many wonderful things in those who are evil, to be sure, even as your wisest men did not strike me as very wise. I found men's evil too smaller than its reputation, and I asked myself, shaking my head, why go on rattling, you rattlesnakes? Verily, there is a future for evil, too, and the hottest south has not yet been discovered for man. How many things are now called grossest wickedness and are yet only 12 shoes wide and 3 months long? One day, however, bigger dragons shall come to this world, for in order that the overman should not lack his dragon, the over-dragon that is worthy of him, much hot sunshine must glow upon damp jungles. Your wild cats must first turn into tigers, and your poisonous toads into crocodiles, and for the good hunter shall have a good hunting. Verily, you are a good and just. There is much about you that is laughable, and especially your fear of that which is hitherto to be called devil. What is great is so alien to your soul that the overman would be awesome to you in his kindness. What you are wise in knowing, you would flee from the burning sun of that wisdom in which the overman joyously bathes his nakedness. You highest men whom my eyes have seen, this is my doubt concerning you and my secret laughter. I guess that you would call my overman devil. Alas, I have wearied of these highest and best men. From their height I longed to get up, out, and away to the Overman. A shudder came over me when I saw these of the best ones naked, and I grew wings to soar off into distant futures, into the more distant futures, into the southern souths than any artist ever dreamed of, where your gods are ashamed of all clothes. But I want to see you disguided, my neighbor, and fellow men, and well decked out and vain and dignified as the good and the just. And I myself want to sit amongst you disguised, misjudging you and myself. And that is the final instance of my human prudence. Thus spake Zarathustra. All right, before I go, I want to say thank you guys. Thank you for my supporters. I appreciate it. And also, I want to kind of say, hey, this messaging app, this Flick app, it's a messenger built around different podcasts. And you have to have the link. It's in the show notes. And then there is a code. My code is the Abercast, all one word, lowercase. And I'm curious to see if you guys dig it. I mean, I'm paying attention to it right now just because I'm trying to figure it the fuck out. But if you're interested in it, check it out. If you're already on there, then definitely find my channel or my feed or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how it works. I'm Gen X. Anyhow, yeah. So do that. And then also want to remind you guys about the Fulgore Correspondentia. There's some Archangel Gabriel artwork scanned in from some of my early stuff and some of my graphic novels. That's scanned in. And then there's a whole huge infographic called 9/11 in Context, which I spent a lot of time on. It starts 9/11, 1683, and it goes down like a lightning bolt, sort of, all the way down to September 11th, 2001. And I'm really proud of it because I did put a lot of time into it. And then also there's the Melchizedek Theory infographic that I'm also interested in. Melchizedek came up twice this month, so I knew I had to put the graphic together. It came up in, Abraham. It came up in the Abraham episode, and then it also came up in, what is it? The swine, the skull, and the sex episode of the Solomon stuff. Yeah. So anyhow, I did a whole infographic about the Melchizedek Theory. So there you go. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review. On this month's exclusive Order of the Fellowcraft episode.
Towards Mount Rainier, he saw 9 gleaming discs outlined against the snow, each one about the size of a C-54. Is it a function of false reporting? Is it a function of media incompetence or straight up misinformation? From my point of view, every, quote, flying saucer, unquote, story from this point on is at least a suspect for some sort of corruption. It has been over 2 years since the puzzling death of Captain Mantell. Mantell died mysteriously in the skies south of Fort Knox, but before his radio went silent, he sent a strange message to Goodman Air Force Base.
Support the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.